Hi guys, today I am going to be explaining every single aspect of Tingyun, what makes her good, what makes her great, and why you should be building her right now. As always, I'll break down each section, what relics you should have on her, how good her Eidolons are, and who she pairs best with. Tingyun is tied for Star Rail's best 4-star, alongside characters like March 7th who have insane utility and Dan Heng whose DPS is off the chart for a 4-star. Tingyun provides unlimited potential and offensive buffing matched only by Bronya, who you can run together with Tingyun for OP hypercarry potential. Now, unlike some of the other free 4-stars that are provided early on, Tingyun matches the same sort of role in a team composition that Pela does. Characters like the Fire Trailblazer take on the slot of tank, DPSs like Sealy, Himiko, or Yangxing take on the role of DPS, Bailu and Natasha take on the role of healer, but the final slot in a team is usually up in the air. Some teams prefer running an extra healer, an extra DPS, or even maybe an extra tank, but if you're looking to clear content faster, look no further than the coveted utility buffer slot. Tingyun, Pela, Asta, and Bronya do have damage in their kits, but the majority of their selling points are their buffs or offensive debuffs. But again, I'm just here to teach you about Tingyun. Let's get into it. Tingyun's best light cones really boil down to one of three options. For the absolute most free to play, no desire to look for anything else light cone, I suggest Chorus. Gaining 12% attack for all allies turn 1 as a 3-star is probably going to be the most bang for your buck. Increased speed could maybe serve you well if you aren't running Bronya and want a character like Sealy to take more turns, but the increased speed is only 1 turn, and Sealy probably wants the attack increase for longer anyways. That being said, I would still highly consider purchasing Past and Future, the 4-star Harmony light cone from the Forgotten Hall store. Providing a DPS that takes their turn after Tingyun to do an additional 16 up to 32% increased damage is super significant, especially when you have 2 DPS or are playing a 2 buffer 1 hypercarry DPS composition. There are a number of other 4-star light cones like Dance 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 and Carve the Moon, Weave the Clouds that can be situationally useful, but in general, I find the consistency of Past and Future's damage buff to be more valuable than a chance for a useful buff or an increase in when you get your next turn. However, the third and most well option available for Tingyun's light cone is just Bronya's artifact, but the battle isn't over. Now, normally I would say that honkaistarrail is pretty good at keeping the 4 and 3-star options competitive with the 5-star roster or light cone list, but this is pretty much everything you could ever ask for from a buffer's point of view. In addition to giving an even higher damage buff to an ally, this light cone also increases the wearer's energy regeneration and gives a skill point when they use their ultimate on an ally. So in other words, it's better than all the other light cones combined. Thank you, Hoyoverse. But to be clear, any bonus that you receive from a light cone is usually more than enough to supplement the ridiculousness of the rest of her kit. And wow, this is a great segue, Connor, into traces. Tingyun's traces are fairly free to play friendly, especially if you're just focusing on her role as an offensive buffer. Tingyun's skill, which increases an ally's attack by 55% plus 27% of Tingyun's current attack, and then also buffs the ally's attack to gain 44% lightning damage equal to his or her attack, makes this an absolutely ridiculous buff by itself. And what's that? Her ultimate does what? That's right. In addition to a more than 50% attack increased lightning damage infused buff, her ultimate increases a target's damage by 56% and also regenerates their energy by 50. If you're unfamiliar with all the terminology I'm throwing around, she can make any character atomic. So all that really needs to be upgraded are the traces that upgrade her ultimate or skill, and any additional attack or tank stat bonuses. I know she herself probably won't do much damage, but it is worth noting that since her skill scales off of her own attack, taking the added attack stat bonus is worthwhile too. But before we move on from skills, something to note as well is that there are no other characters in honkaistarrail that can provide energy the same way that she can. So in case you, I don't know, just wanted to run her for fun or wanted to cycle any character's ultimate, you can usually fill anywhere between 40 to 50% of the ultimate bar when a Mist of Rejoining Cloud is available. In the relic department, there is a lot of leeway that you can give when it comes to gearing a character like Tingyun, especially when honkaistarrail really hasn't been out for too long. At the moment, most players are investing their energy in farming or upgrading characters like Sealy, Clara, Himiko, or some other DPS. And that does happen to be one of Tingyun's secondary selling points, which is that her overall required investment to be usable is just so low. So for relics, you could argue that using the Cowboy, or as they call it, Musketeer of Wild Wheat set, is ideal, but Tingyun honestly doesn't do much after she uses her skill or ultimate, so you can really run anything so long as she doesn't die. In regard to her ornaments, Fleet of the Ageless is a great dual purpose relic set since it does provide HP percent to prevent Tingyun from keeling over and dying, and she does give allies 8% attack. If you did want to min-max her stats or substats, you could certainly invest in an attack percent chest and planar sphere followed by a speed main stat boot and an energy regen link rope, but this is super early min-maxing when we aren't entirely sure if they're going to release anything new or a new set that complements her better. Alternatively, if you just want to make sure she doesn't die, having any defensive main stats for your relics while having a speed main stat boot would also just work wonders. In some cases, you could argue that having an attack percent boot would also work, assuming you can speed tune your team well enough to avoid someone other than your DPS from going after Tingyun, but all of that and this is really pushing the envelope for a character that is probably just going to be treated like Bennett. For substats, attack percent, speed, and defensive substats are ideal, followed by break effect, I guess. This character really doesn't require a lot, guys, I promise. Even after considering the fact that she provides some of her own attack percent to allies, the actual amount that you provide to your buffed ally is just not enough to justify spending what little resin you have every day on proper relics just for her. And oh boy, on to the gacha section. Tingyun's Eidolons are actually pretty good, which is great because she's a 4-star non-limited banner character. Her first Eidolon is pretty mediocre, but will take a free 20% increase in speed. But once we get to her second and fourth Eidolons, we actually begin to pick up steam. Her second Eidolon provides additional energy to the ally who has the Benediction buff once you kill an enemy. And an increased 20% damage multiplier provided by Benediction is just the cherry on top for a team composition revolved around buffing DPSs. Tingyun's sixth and final Eidolon is pretty nice since it does give an additional 10 energy to the ally targeted by her ultimate, but an additional 5 or 10% increase is nothing spectacular or to write home about, especially when a lot of hypercarry matches end in a few turns. Overall, I would say that getting to Eidolon 4 on Tingyun is probably peak value, but a trend that you may have already noticed in Star Rail is its lack of dependency on Eidolons overall. Yes, you can certainly gain more damage or tankiness in some cases when it comes to Eidolons, but there aren't too many characters that have major changes to their kit upon reaching Eidolon 6. In Tingyun's case, the Eidolon 6 is probably insignificant unless you're able to cycle 3 or more ultimates in a boss fight. But to be honest, how many fights actually last 3 whole ultimate rotations when you're running a DPS with Bronya Tingyun in either a flex DPS or Pela? And now for my favorite part of every guide, whose team is it anyway? Another consistent feature within Honkai Star Rail is the flexibility and freedom for players to pretty much make any team composition or character combo work. Tingyun is no exception with her unlimited versatility and ability to work with any and all characters. Providing a damage buff and 50 energy alone are enough to justify slamming her into any team comp. This will only become more relevant as newer DPS come out and characters start reaching level 60, 70, etc, etc. But personally, I find that Tingyun excels with 2 compositions the most. For the more free-to-play friendly options, I find that using Dan Heng, Tingyun, the Fire Trailblazer, and either Asta, Pela, or Natasha works best. Using Asta or Pela makes the most sense as the final flex pick when healing is not a concern, but otherwise the healing and cleanses from Natasha do well to stabilize your team along a Trailblazer. Defense reduction or attack plus speed buffs are both great in damage checks in simulated universes when you have shield blessings or in farming sessions against overworld enemies for materials. So Pela, Tingyun, the Fire Trailblazer, and Dan Heng would be a great early free-to-play comp that still clears content fast. For the dolphins, whales, belugas that are here, boy do I have the composition for you. Tingyun, Sealy, Pela, and Bronya when speed tuned correctly have the absolute highest damage potential in any near realistic damage scenario. The defense reduction from Pela, followed by C damage, attack, and damage buff from Bronya, ending with an additional damage, attack, and lightning damage enhancement leaves you with this. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. For an even more realistic, safe, but still very good composition, I highly recommend replacing Pela with Bailu. The moderate increase in damage is really not worth losing Bailu's revive or heal, especially when some fights are long, full of random mechanics that can kill you, or have shields that you have to break before anyone can take damage. But finally, I must remind you all, these team comps are directed for whales. Don't try this at home. Anyways, I think you guys can kind of already tell how busted of a character Tingyun is. Hoyoverse has honestly been doing great in making characters that are easier to access while still being visually appealing and being good in game as well. Tingyun, like many of the other 4-star characters, also just doesn't need to have max Eidolons to be usable. This, in combination with the low investment thing I've been parroting for about 8 minutes now, really makes her one of Star Rail's must build characters at the moment. But in any case, that's going to be it for my Tingyun all you can eat sleep dream research need guide. If you're curious about where I test and experiment with team compositions, you can find me on Twitch, Discord, or Twitter. And if you found today's guide helpful, I would appreciate it if you would like, comment, turn on the notification bell, subscribe, and I'll see you all next time, guys. Bye-bye.